All righty, good morning, everybody. It is 8:45 on a beautiful Monday. I hope you enjoyed the weekend. And coming off a great weekend, we have an amazing guest for us.
Hi.
You're getting announced just like your walk-up.
Oh.
Yeah. So Leigh Anne Craig is here with us from Republic Title, and she is semi-famous.
Thanks.
Yes, and she totally knows what she's talking about. And we have a topic that we're going to be bringing up this morning, yes. Right? And it's an important one. And Leigh Anne has brought a lot of great information that we can actually share, review, and go over. So the topic that we're going to go over today is FIRPTA, which is
the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. It's a mouthful.
And the people who are most interested in this is
everybody, because it impacts your buyers when they're purchasing a property being sold by a foreign seller. So foreign sellers and pretty much any buyer.
Okay, so you'll talk just a little bit louder as you go on, but it's basically any time that there's a foreign seller, correct?
That is absolutely correct.
All right, so Leigh Anne, the reason that we have brought her on today to specifically discuss this is because she has true knowledge. And it's easy to just go into the simple stuff and just say, it affects you if you have a foreign seller. And that's fine. But now what we're actually going to be able to do is dissect the information, delve in, and go, you're capable of going a little bit deeper with the concept.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do here for us is I'm going to now chat into us a PDF that she has been nice enough to put together that is going to thoroughly cover everything. So that is now chatted into you, and I'm going to share the screen, and we are going to review this all together. And I'm going to hand over the mouse and allow Leigh Anne to kind of take control and show us and discuss some items here.
Okay, so the biggest thing is just our lovely little Trek 1 to 4 family contract. The FIRPTA is really discussed in paragraph 20, and it's the federal tax requirements. It was rephrased on that last version to be a little bit more specific, but also still vague because that's what they like to do. So, and it's just if the seller is a foreign person as defined by the Internal Revenue Code. So it's not something where you have to feel like you need to say, so are you foreign? It's if they're not a U.S. citizen or if they are not considered a permanent resident alien by Internal Revenue Code standards. Just FYI. So that's really what it is. So that's kind of where it's coming from is paragraph 20 in the contract. Then when we are collecting information, when we've got that contract, we're asking all sellers if they are a U.S. citizen, and if not, are you a permanent resident alien with a valid green card? Because if you are either one of those, this does not apply.
Okay.
So
let's talk a little bit more about all these different classifications, because we have a lot of people around here that are in potentially gray areas that we're at least discussing this concept with. So hit us with a couple of them, and let's discuss some places where it could be and where it couldn't be
as far
applicable to the person, right? So let's go over. My son, for example, has a girlfriend that's in Paris.
Okay.
And she's a French citizen.
Okay.
So she could be over here on a student visa.
Correct.
So she comes over on a student visa and she purchased a property.
Okay. If by the time she sells, she has not applied for and received status as a permanent resident alien.
Correct.
With a green card.
Right.
She would be a foreign person.
Okay. So that's good. So we're starting to go through some different classifications and different things. And it's important as we go through this is to understand what those would be. You don't have to remember them. You have to remember that you can call Leigh Anne.
Yes.
And she can go through it. But just understanding and talking about some of this stuff is good. So that would be a foreigner that's here on a green card, that are not on a green card, but on a student visa.
Correct.
Other ones are going to be work-related visas.
Yep.
Right?
And same thing. So, and it's, one of those things where you either are or you aren't. So you either are a U.S. citizen or you're not. You either are a permanent resident with a green card or you're not. And so if it's no to both of those, this does potentially apply. And I say potentially because there are exceptions to every rule.
Whoa.
So yes. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to tease It's going to be coming up in one of my little documents here. So, but when we find out at the beginning of a transaction that this person is in fact somebody who could fall under the FERPTA rules, we're going to first call an agent involved because heck, y'all need to know what's going on. Then we're going to be talking to the buyers and the sellers in the transaction and potentially sending this little document out here, which is kind of a catch-22 because it starts some very interesting conversations.
Yeah, it really does. And the buyer normally is like, what? Why would I do that?
Exactly. So, and basically the whole FERPTA withholding, technically speaking, is the buyer's responsibility. So it is their responsibility to ensure that this is being withheld. But it's also their right to say, you know what, I'm okay with a not withholding. And that typically ends up, because first things first, as soon as a seller finds out that they're potentially subject to the FERPTA withholding, which is either 10% of the gross sales price or 15% of the gross sales price. There's a bunch of different scenarios in which it's the 10 or the 15. But basically, they're going to start looking through there. They're going to go to the IRS website, and they're going to find something called the substantial presence test.
Okay.
And it is something where basically the seller can say, no, I don't need this withholding because I'm present in the United States enough to qualify for no withholding. Most of the time they're trying to make the argument to us, and unfortunately we then have to pass it off because ultimately it is not our decision whether withholding does or does not occur. It's the buyer. So, because if this withholding is not done at the time of closing and submitted to the IRS within 20 days of closing on the sale or purchase of the home, the buyer could potentially be on the hook for that 10 or 15% of the gross sales price plus IRS penalties and interest.
So there's not a lot of buyers that are going to be like, oh, that's cool. Your definition of passing a substantial test is good with me. Yeah, okay. And if I'm wrong, then I have to be liable for all this. And that's kind of cool. So thank you for that argument.
Yeah.
Most of them and most agents are going to be like, whoa, 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 let's slow this train down just a little bit.
Yes. And that's where, we try to kind of play the middleman and just it's our job to be a neutral third party in any transaction, but to make sure that we're getting the right information to everybody and allowing people to make educated decisions for themselves. I have had a buyer waive withholding based on the seller's argument of substantial presence test. Whoa. So, it's their ability to make that decision. Me personally, if I was that buyer, I don't know them from Adam. So
yes,
I don't know that I would do it. But again, it's making educated and informed decisions.
Now, just because it's withheld does not mean that they're not going to get it back.
That is correct.
So they might have to wait on it for just a little bit.
Yes.
Correct.
And so what we do, and we do things a little bit differently, is we actually do withhold it from the settlement statement or from the closing disclosure. And we go ahead and have all of the appropriate paperwork collected and completed at closing because it's got seller information, buyer information, and we submit that check over to the IRS.
Correct.
That seller can apply to get all or part of that back based on whatever their tax situation is back right away. So they do not need to wait until they're filing their taxes for that tax year. For instance, closing this year, they don't have to wait until January through April of next year to apply to get that back.
Right.
They can do it right away.
Okay.
So
it's kind of just getting held. Would they be getting this money back if they filed in due course? Probably the same type of time that a seller would be getting their escrow money back that's held in that escrow account?
That, honestly, I'm not entirely sure because that is Internal Revenue Service that we're talking about. So, I know they're a little bit behind still just catching up from government shutdown. So I'm not sure on the timing on that.
Okay. Well, I've had, my experiences with the IRS have been very pleasant. I've been really, really happy with my experience with the IRS. Every time that I do something and send something in, I get a prompt response and the things come back promptly. And really, it's just a matter of, maybe 2 weeks and whatever it is completed and done, right? You just send it in correctly and you get it back correctly.
Yes.
Not a big deal.
No.
So So that's kind of that. But yes, if we have a buyer, so from our company standpoint, if you were asking me as a real estate broker, my determination would be no, as a buyer, do not get involved in this. That is the seller's responsibility to have understood and done beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to know what they're doing and how it works. And that's kind of their issue. And then we're over here, we're trying to buy a property, let them take care of their own problems. This is something that should have came up when they were listing their property initially. Mm-hmm. If they're using a full service real estate professional who knows what they're doing, they're going to walk them through this. If not, okay.
Yeah. And that is something, I mean, if you guys do happen to have foreign sellers, that is something important too, because that's part of what you guys can do is actually help them apply through the IRS for a certificate of withholding. And then they potentially don't have to have the 10 or the 15% withheld if they are in fact a foreign seller. So.
All right, so that was a knowledge bomb Leigh Anne just dropped for us. So let's back up just a second and review that again. So now we have a seller who's going to be listing their property.
Yes.
And we walk in and we realize and identify this right away.
Yes.
So then we are going to do what?
You're going to, and we've got the link for the IRS.gov website regarding FIRPTA, and the seller can actually apply for a certificate of withholding. And so that they submit all of their information to the IRS. It can take about 90 days. But it's something that if they, the sooner they apply for it, obviously the sooner that 90 days comes up. And if they get that certificate, then it tells us as a settlement agent and you as a listing agent that, maybe they don't have the withholding, or maybe they're at the 10% when maybe this transaction would have been a 15%.
Okay.
So different things like that, but the IRS will tell us what they qualify for.
Okay.
So,
very good.
yes.
Keep going through here.
Okay.
That was really good. Thank you for that.
My pleasure. So this right here is one of the exemptions that we actually have. So let's just say you do in fact have a foreign seller, but this property or this transaction is for $300,000 or less, and the buyer intends to reside or have a member of their family reside in the home for at least 50% over the next 2 years. So 50% of the first year and 50% of the second year. They can actually have this waived. So, and this is the buyer would sign this at closing just saying, yes, I am acquiring this. This will be my primary residence or my kid's primary residence or mom's for at least 50% over the next 2 years. And so then we do not have to withhold that FIRPTA tax and send it on over to the IRS. Okay. So that's something that's very helpful. If you do, in fact, have a foreign seller, I've had some of the agents that I work with have had foreign sellers, and they have marketed the property that it cannot be to investors. They cannot sell to an investor because they want to take advantage of this exemption.
Oh.
So,
okay.
And it just, means you guys get a little bit more fun on trying to figure out what's going on. So,
okay. So the $300,000 number is a key number.
It is a key number.
In this situation.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's that. And then we have, my goodness, I sent that twice. So you just get to see it twice. And then you've got this right here. So let's just say that we do actually have a transaction that does have the FIRPTA withholding. Well, in order for the seller to be able to apply and get that back, they do need some information from the buyer, because everything is filed with the buyer's social security number to the IRS.
Whoa.
Yes, and that's something that if you guys have questions, I would be happy to get y'all with the attorneys on that one.
Yeah, because I remember having this exact part. They're like, I'm not going to give you my social.
Right.
Why am I doing that? And you go through this whole conversation, and it's like, wow, all right, cool. Yeah, I'm a buyer, and now I'm giving this random person who, Yeah,
it's very uncomfortable, but we did create this to at least make it something that everybody is at least aware of, like, hey, in the event, because we're not just handing it over. We're not going, oh, hey, by the way, seller, here's buyer's social security number and, date of birth, mother's maiden name. We're not going to do that. But in the event that the seller chooses to file for the application for the withholding certificate for the disposition. So they're trying to get that money back.
Yes.
The buyer can give permission for them to do that. And generally speaking, in our experience, this is not, you're not talking about somebody who's now going out and on
Correct.
the dark web.
The idea behind this is that that's kind of the file number, according to the IRS, when they call in, they need to reference that.
Right.
So now, is that a good idea? I don't know. They tell us not to use that as the number, but yet that's how they kind of are doing it. So that's the identifier, so to speak.
So, and that helps to facilitate that seller being able to obtain that money back, whatever amount may be due to them from the IRS, from that withholding, whether it's all or some, but that's really where that comes from. So that's something, again, we have signed at closing. And it just is part of the whole FERPTA transaction.
So this is why we work with people that have been in the industry for a long time, that know what they're doing, because that totally makes a difference.
It does. And also it makes a difference to make sure that you have a title company that is checking that the seller may or may not be eligible for this, because there is such a thing as a qualified substitute. And typically speaking, the IRS, they're going to tell, or most of the time, the settlement agent ends up being the qualified substitute on behalf of the buyer. So we're the ones who are gathering that information and ensuring that the transaction is being closed according to all applicable laws.
All right. So if you think Leigh Anne is awesome, like we do, then you can see her every third Thursday for happy hour.
Yes.
Go ahead and talk about this.
So our very first one, this is our inaugural third Thursday happy hour, and that is going to be this, Thursday, May 16th. So this month, the third Thursday, from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock at the Gentle Creek Country Club. We're going to have kind of a
country club.
Yes.
Is it always at a country club?
No, we are going to find different areas around kind of the Prosper Salina area for our Prosper office. Just trying to, make sure everybody knows that we're there, and, really facilitate those conversations, because my goodness, market has shifted, and it sure is nice to have agents chat, and you never know, you guys have a buyer, they've got a listing, vice versa. Let's chat.
So this is a good time for you to just get out and ask some questions. And Leigh Anne has the ability to answer questions for you, which is really, really nice. And now you have an opportunity to answer a question for Leigh Anne.
Ooh.
So you brought something with you. So let's go to that, and let's show off what you got.
All right. So we have this lovely bottle of sparkling white wine. So let's be real, we all like wine in this industry. So this is a nice bottle, whether you want to enjoy it yourself or perhaps use it as a closing gift, that's up to you. But nice bottle of wine, and
very good. It's from Republic Title. So now we have a question.
Okay, so let's just ask, what does FERPTA stand for?
Oh, the first person to type in what FERPTA stands for correctly is the winner and recipient. Mike Shepard is asking 10%.
I'm not sure.
His concept, the question, 10%. Yeah, Mike, it's either 10 or 15%.
Correct. And I actually brought my little notes here because it depends on buyers and sellers.
Okay. So it depends is the answer.
Yes. So it'll depend on the sales price. It'll also depend on whether or not, Amy.
All right.
I think Amy is our winner. Foreign Investment and Real Property Tax Act.
All right. So Amy has the fastest fingers. Nice job. Wino Amy.
Yes.
All right. Amy likes boxed wine.
Oh, hey.
She might be offended that you happen to bring it in a bottle.
No shame. No shame. I've heard there's some really good boxed wine now.
That's what she's telling me. She's telling me all that. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. You brought some good knowledge to us. We're truly thankful. And it's great people that we get to work with in this industry that allow us to do our job the best we possibly can. Oh, she's over it. She's grown up a little bit.
Oh, good.
I don't know. I was just with her a couple of months ago, and she was totally box whining it. So she's over it. This is a new thing. This is totally new.
You know what? It's a change. It's okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. See you guys later.
Thank you, guys.